Hello, third graders, and today in science we are learning about simple machines. Now, if you haven't already watched the video that was also attached about simple machines, I want you to go ahead and watch that first. And then you can come back and watch this video. Now, since you've already watched the video, I want you to write down some things you want to know about simple machines. Maybe you already knew about simple machines. If you already knew some things about simple machines, you can write that down underneath the what I know. If you want to learn something new, you can write it under what I want to know. We're not going to fill out the what I learned until after this lesson. Now, simple machines use two things to make them work. The first thing is a push or pull on an object, and we call that force. We call that force. There's a push or a pull on an object. Now, if we have the push and pull of an object and it moves, that is called work. Okay, if we have a push or pull, the force, and it moves, that is called work. Now, the reason we have simple machines is because it makes work easier. So instead of carrying a really heavy box, we could use a type of simple machine that would make it lighter and make our work easier. Now, here are some things we're going to look at today. The first one is a simple machine, a compound machine, force, and work. We're not going to look at load or form for right now. Now, the first thing we have to know is a simple machine only has one simple machine. Okay, let's see what's in. It uses few or no parts to make something work. A compound machine is made up of two or more simple machines to make it work. It uses two or more simple machines. We just talked about force, and force is the push or pull of an object. Work is the force over a distance, so the push or pull, and it moves. Now, the other two are the load, how much weight we have to move, and then the form, the shape of the object. But we're not going to look at that too much today. Now, there are 6 different kinds of simple machines. The first one we call an inclined plane. Inclined plane. Now, you've probably seen one of these at the park. A slide. It moves you down quickly by using force and gravity. We learned about gravity a little bit last week. The second one is called a screw. The third one is called a pulley. The fourth one is a wheel and axle that you see on cars. The next one is called a wedge. And then finally, we have the lever. Now, the lever has 2 parts, and we're going to talk about those a little bit more. Now, I want you to think about those 6 types and look at what seems a little bit similar. Now, the pulley had a string and then a cylindrical item to pull it over. This would be an example, a well would be an example of a pulley. A pulley. Now, clippers would be an example of a lever. A lever. Kind of like a seesaw is what we think of when we think of a lever. A car wheel has an axle and a wheel. So that is a wheel and axle simple machine. Twisting on a bottle cap, that is a screw. The handle would also be a wheel and axle. Behind the knob is actually a bar that helps move the lock on the door. And finally, a stapler would also be a lever. Now we're first going to watch a quick video on some examples of inclined planes and then fill out the information on our class kit. So an inclined plane always has an angle, so we can move things down and up it. So if Doc on here wants to lift and place, I moved my face, sorry, and place his barrel on a ledge, it is a bit difficult. With the help of an inclined plane, Doc can now roll the same mass up a sloping hill. Much easier effort, much less effort. It's called work. That's because the force, remember that's the push or pull of an object, it required to raise the object off the ground is much harder than pushing it up an inclined plane. So once again, simple machines help us with work, moving an object with force. All right. So once again, inclined plane is an angled plane that helps you move stuff up. So that's the form. That's what it looks like. It's an angled plane. The function is to move objects up or down. So if you had to put something maybe in your mom's van and it was very, very heavy, you could use an inclined plane to roll it up or push it up. It makes work easier by making the force easier to push. You have to use less force. Now, what are some examples of an inclined plane? I want you to write down at least one example of an inclined plane. You can search for an image and place it inside the box. So now we're going to look at a wedge. It's another kind of inclined plane, but it's used for different purposes. It isn't stationary, which means that it stays in one place. A wedge is something that you can put in different places.
What is a wedge? The wedge is the active twin of the inclined plane and one of the 6 classical simple machines. Unlike an inclined plane, which is stationary, a wedge does useful work by moving. A wedge is made up of 2 inclined planes. These planes meet and form a sharp edge. For a wedge, the effort force is applied to the vertical edge of the wedge. We often see a wedge being used for many things, like to separate portions of an object, to lift a heavy load.
Maybe you've even seen types of wedges that they use to stop doors from swinging in and out.
Or to hold an object in place and avoid it from moving. The force yielded from the wedge is inversely proportional to the inclined plane. That means if the inclined angle is small, the wedge yields a larger force and may do the job faster than a wedge with a wider angle.
All right. So back on class kick, a wedge is two inclined planes joined together. That's the form. That's what it looks like. The function is most of the time to stop movement or to get in between something. It makes work easier because it applies force on both sides, so then something stops moving. At the beginning of the video, we watched that part of the tree was falling, so they added in a wedge, so then most of the force was hitting on the back and it evened it out. Now I want you to think of other real life examples. I said one of them, when a door is opened and you put a wedge underneath it, it keeps the door from swinging closed. What other wedges have you seen? The final simple machine we're going to look at today is called a lever. Now, when you see a lever, it might remind you of like a seesaw that you see at the playground. It's used by pushing force on one side to bring up an object on the opposite side. The log in the middle, we call that a fulcrum. A fulcrum, that helps reduce the amount of force we have to push down in order to lift up an object. So you can see some items that we use as levers. One is scissors, because you are able to push down on both sides and then create more force on the opposite side. Another one is a wheelbarrow. See that in the background. And finally, I think one you have probably used before is opening a can of soda. Opening a can of soda that has a fulcrum and a lever. Now, if you see in the top where they have the fulcrum almost all the way to the edge, you can change where the fulcrum is to depend on how much effort, how much force you have to give on the other side. There are many things we use every single day that are types of levers. Now, the form of a lever that has a fulcrum and a pivot point. The function is to make less effort. When you're raising a heavy item or when you're cutting through paper. Oops, I put that in the wrong one. Makes work easier by creating less effort. The function is that it pulls or lifts objects. Now I want you to write one real life example that you have seen or used, And then you can add a picture if you would like to by using the camera tool. Finally, we're going to save that for Thursday. On the KWL chart, I want you to write out what you learned. What is a lever? What is an inclined plane? And what is a wedge? You could even write some examples that you use every day. I'll see you tomorrow.